This is Jim Satterfield. Welcome to today's webinar presentation from the Community and Regional Resilience Institute, talking about the Campus Resilience Enhancement System and the program that they've been doing in the market. Firestorm is extremely pleased to be presenting the information today in conjunction with CARRI, and you'll learn a lot about what's been going on and what's yet to come. My name is Jim Satterfield. I'm the president of Firestorm, and we're excited about sharing this information today with you. Quick Firestorm update as we try to start every broadcast with some of the trends that we see happening in the market around the space of crisis management or resilience and continuity. And as we look at that, we see a couple of things happening. Yesterday we had a tornado in the Seattle area, which is extremely unusual, caused some significant power outages there. The UC Berkeley campus had an explosion as a result of thieves stealing copper wiring. So it's a little bit different type of an event that would occur. And we've seen terrorist attacks in Africa on a college campus there, and following the attack in the shopping mall. And so events continue to develop that impact colleges and institutions of higher learning across the country and then around the world. Interestingly, last week, a North Carolina institution received a call from the Canadian Mounties where they'd uncovered a problem via social media that was occurring in North Carolina. So we certainly have a much broader community and an involvement around the world today. So what we're going to do is we have today with us Major General U.S. Army retired Warren Edwards, who is the director of the Community and Regional Research Institute, and Dr. John Plognek, who is the associate director. And they're going to talk with us and share some insights about the program they've been doing with 7 colleges and universities across the U.S. through a Department of Homeland Security grant and ICE. And I think you're going to learn some interesting insights and some opportunities of where this direction has gone. So today's presentation, you'll get a background and an update. You'll learn more about CARES and what went into the making of CARES and the approach and the development around that. We'll also continue to be discussing resilience. That's a term that is becoming more and more used from a business continuity standpoint or ability of operations, both in the public and private sectors and in the business sectors involved. And we see that term really originating out of the UK, where they've been ahead of us in several respects. Then we'll talk about the specific deliverables and some next steps for you to get involved. So that's our introduction today. We wanted to keep it short and focus specifically on our meeting and topics today. So why don't we start, and General Edwards, if you talk a little bit about the Community and Regional Resilience Institute, I would appreciate it. So tell me something about it.
Thanks, Jim. The Community and Regional Resilience Institute, or CARRI as we refer to it, really started as a research project at Oak Ridge National Laboratory in Oak Ridge, Tennessee. And we were asked by the Department of Homeland Security to take a look at why some communities are able to recover and bounce back from disaster, and others seemingly just don't ever recover or come back. Of researchers who helped us understand what we knew about the subject. And we began work in a number of communities across the nation to really drive deeply and find out what worked. So we got a lot of hands-on experience in doing this, and that's the kind of experience we've taken in understanding resilience at the infrastructure level, at the social level, at the economic level, that would help us then take this on to college campuses.
So talk a little bit about what you're doing with college campuses.
Well, we started out, first of all, we were asked, again, by the Department of Homeland Security, the Office of Academic Engagement, the Federal Emergency Management Agency, FEMA, and the Immigrations and Customs Enforcement folks, particularly looking at the international student population, if we could go out and look at college campuses and apply some of the things that we learned in American civic communities to the college and universities campus environment. When we started that, I'll be honest with you, we really saw college campuses as simply communities by another name. They certainly have all the attributes of communities. They have housing, they have food service, they have to take care of transportation and all of those things. But as we got out there, we realized that first and foremost, our institutions of higher education are very, very complex business enterprises. They have all of those characteristics of cities and towns, but they also have to operate like very complex businesses and enterprises. So we had to recognize that, and then we also recognized that they have some very special legal and regulatory requirements that they have to adhere to that drive their resilience, perhaps, or things that influence their resilience in other ways. And we also know that there is some great work that's already been done by those colleges and universities. So our charter was understanding those things to get on the ground with some real colleges and universities and understand how they were dealing with resilience, what they knew about resilience, what we could learn, and then try to bring all of that knowledge together into sort of a common format that lots of colleges and universities could use.
Well, from what I'm hearing then is that colleges and universities today face a great many challenges. Why don't you step us through some of those that you've seen?
Sure. This slide is one we've used at a number of colleges and universities to talk about just those challenges, and I'm certainly not going to read them to you. But you can see from this wide range of things that quite frankly, colleges and universities are dealing with, just like our civic communities are dealing with. So we know that the spectrum of risk has increased. 20, 30 years ago, we didn't see college shootings like we see occasionally, or school shootings that we do now. We didn't face the terrorism threat, and we didn't face some of the large storm threats that we're seeing now. So they're really driving those. We know that colleges are becoming more competitive. As students really question and look carefully at the value of the college they go to, all of these colleges are competing for great students. We know that costs are going up, resources are coming down. Just like our civic communities, we understand that those colleges are deeply embedded in their civic society, and so that there are dependencies and interdependencies out there that have to be recognized, whether it's between infrastructures or between social activities, that they have to recognize to go forward. I mentioned that students and their parents, as we see college tuition costs rising, are really beginning to question the value and what they get out of colleges and universities, and that's changing public perceptions, just like incidents on our campuses change public perception. So we're having to deal with that. Demographics are changing. We're getting an older population. We're getting a population that is less ethnically the same. We certainly see a great deal of diversity coming to our college. And then, of course, there are always increasing compliance requirements that are out there. So this is just sort of a field that universities have to think about, institutions of higher education have to think about, as they think about how are they not just going to deal with adversity, but how are they going to deal with a very turbulent and changing future that's going to change in ways that we sometimes can't foresee, and sometimes faster than we can deal with it.
And I think you've outlined those challenges well. We also see an increasing risk spectrum that individuals and organizations have to face. The resources are declining, and expectations and requirement are going up. So I think that's very consistent with what we've seen in our experiences. John, talk a little bit about the development of CARES and the goals, and what's it really all about?
Well, we started out just the same way we did as with communities, with one thing in mind, which is it's not about doing just another plan. It's actually taking action. Taking action to be ready to respond, taking action to be able to recover quickly without using all the resources that known demand. That meant then that any school's got to be able to use this if it's going to truly be action-oriented. And also, we didn't have to reinvent everything, but we did have to integrate what all of the marvelous tools that are out there, as many as we could shoehorn in the time we had. For example, I mentioned the DRU crosswalk. At each of the schools we've gone to, we've picked up like playbooks or checklists or good stories in terms of examples of here's how you can do something. And so what we've tried to do is incorporate all of those into CARES and then, of course, take it to the campuses and have them start kicking the tires and telling us where we were wrong. And it required, I think, more than anything else, a great deal of humility on our part to say, okay, we've started this now. Partners, help us make this really work.
You brought up the term partners, and I think there's a list up now on the screen of the universities and colleges that you've been working with. General, any comments or observations about this group of 7?
Well, this is, we've sometimes referred to these right now as our Magnificent 7 because they have been true partners and have truly helped us understand resilience on colleges and university campuses. As I said, we came out of this from a civic community background, and we really wanted to get a great diversity of schools. And if you see on the screen, we were able to accomplish that with the help of a Department of Homeland Security selection process. So we got a couple of large research universities, one public and one private. We got some mid-sized universities, one public and one private. We wanted to get a community college, a historical black college, a tribal university, and a community college. And we were able to get that diversity and visit each one of those so that we saw how big universities operate with their very robust resources. And we were able to see how very small and schools operate with a scarcity of resources. And that has allowed us, we think, to adapt this CARES process in ways that it can be beneficial to that wide range of schools and has a wide range of resources that can be used by large, small, urban, rural, private, public, specialty schools, whatever that school needs.
Well, I think you've got an excellent distribution, both in size, location, and nature of operation here from that perspective. John, share a little bit more about the approach. And I took your 7 there, and I heard you refer to it as the Magnificent 7.
Yeah, in essence, they have been magnificent for us because they work closely with us to take what we started out with, a sort of a baseline, a straw man, if you will, that represented everything we could bring together, that was available on a research basis, and then put the practicality into it. Tell us, for example, as both Drexel and A&M very pointedly did, you need to have a separate focus on IT matters to help us understand better the complexity of the different parts of campuses that are looking at campus life. At 2 of the campuses, for example, veterans were making a really significant contribution in terms of either getting started or helping to flower efforts around CERT teams. So they really were truly partners in helping us take the straw man, the baseline, expand it, enrich it, and make it what it is today.
General, let's talk about that engagement process. It looks like you did a bunch of different approaches in order to get to the end product.
Well, we did, Jim. As John pointed out, we had our partners that we knew had a tremendous amount of information and knowledge that we needed. We also were constrained a bit by, as usual, fewer resources than we would like to have had to do this, and a little bit less time to get it done. And so we realized we had to take a wide and varied approach. we've gone out to these universities, and they have lived with us for a year, responding to surveys, doing meetings online, webinars with them so that we could get their feedback on our process and where we were going, sending them questionnaires, this kind of virtual engagement. We've had them together in groups to talk, and then throughout the process, during the process, we actually went to each school for an intense week at each one of the schools. And they were very gracious with us and gave us access to the school, to the leadership of the school, to the students, to the faculty, to the staff, and allowed us to both conduct a series of workshops. As you'll hear later, we have really worked our assessment or structured our assessment around some community or campus service areas. And so in each one of these campuses, we actually did some workshops based on a number of those service areas that the college helped us identify. So we might do a workshop on communications and a workshop on student life and a workshop on finances on one day, and then the next day we would do similar workshops that talked about the actions that would flow from what we learned in the first day. So we did a wide number of workshops. We also did hundreds of interviews. They were gracious enough to give us access to, again, the staff, the faculty, the leaders, the students, everyone from people who maintain buildings to people who teach very exotic and exciting academic courses. And we were able to glean from them their ideas on what it took to have a university go through a disturbance, an adverse event, and then recover as quickly as possible and get themselves back in business of providing that education to students. So it has been a wide engagement. It's been a deep engagement. And I will tell you that I'm sure each one of the schools that hosted us for a week was delighted to see us leave because they put us through our paces and we put them through the paces. But we were there to listen. We did listen, and we got a tremendous amount out of that. Now, we've also followed up with all of those schools as we walked out, and we continue to do surveys. We continue to call them back and ask for materials. They have been absolutely gracious in giving us things that we can incorporate into the school, whether it was stories, best practices, templates, playbooks, any of those kinds of things. So it's been a wide, a deep, and a very broad engagement, and it continues today. We are working with them on an almost daily basis.
Well, one of the things that we're going to share, obviously, as we continue our conversations today, are that there will be new opportunities for other schools to now participate, some expanded role with this Magnificent Seven and what they've been gone through to this particular point. I looked at some of the survey information that you collected, not only from the Seven, but from other colleges and universities, and there were a couple of the survey questions and results that I found of interest. So, John, as we look at these, the first of the three, it talks about a formal risk assessment program looking at strategic risk. And what startles me at this point is that you see obviously a lot have been looking at those, but a fair number couldn't say that they have or have not. And as a general rule within Firestorm, if somebody answers, I don't know, that means it doesn't exist. It's clearly not a part of the culture from that standpoint. Any other observations about this survey question before we go to the others, John?
Yeah, two things. One, I think it again shows some of the diversity that we had to or have had to work or to try to take into account as we're developing CARES, in that schools are at different levels of maturity in terms of how they handle the risks of emergency management, almost anything. The second is that doesn't show here is the trend. The trend is to have an increasing number of schools that are in fact paying strategic attention to risk where they haven't been before. So there are two aspects to that survey. Sure.
And could I just jump in and say, and I'm sure this is clear to everyone listening, but just to be sure, this survey is not just to those 7 schools. This is a much wider survey that we said, as you can see by the numbers out there. So this survey doesn't just represent those 7. It represents a much wider range of schools that we were able to get to participate in our surveys.
And interestingly, and we were talking before our webinar this afternoon about the difference between the college marketplace and the business marketplace. You would be surprised that in the business infrastructure, and 85% of the infrastructure in America is in the private sector, probably is even lagging behind that yes percentage that we see on this particular chart. John, the next one is really talking about facilities master plans being updated and the frequency of that. And it looks like there's a much longer horizon to make sure that you get the facilities that you need. It's not a turn on a dime type of a basis for a college and university. Is that what I should gather out of this?
I think there's two things. Again, one is you're exactly right. The college, because colleges do not often change, especially smaller ones, don't change their infrastructure as rapidly or need to do so as some businesses might. The facilities plan, a master plan, may be a governing document that sits there more or less unchanged with just perhaps an annual update for 5-10 years. I think the other thing though that does jump out is the large number or large variability in terms of the terms, the durations of for each plan. Some schools do formally do it annually. Some, on the other hand, can allow a plan to exist for a decade and perhaps even more. So there's a large diversity in how schools are handling their master plan.
And when you look at the events like the flooding recently in Colorado, and you've seen the 1,000-year flood and the wildfires that have just come through, obviously the need to look at this on a more frequent basis is increasing as we move across. The next chart really talks about the strategic or institutional planning, and again it seems that the time frames are fairly long in terms of coming to review. And if you look at this from a strategic and an institutional level, and you think back into periods of more than 5 years, look at the change in the role that social media plays. Look at the differences that have occurred within our lives here in the United States. And it looks like there's a lag here from the way that the survey participants were in terms of updating their plans. John, any other insights here?
Yeah, I think in combination with the previous chart, one thing that we found in talking with the schools was that in fact they have a plethora of plans. There'll be potentially a strategic or institutional plan. They'll have their facilities master plan. Some have a land use plan. To paraphrase the old saying, all God's children's got plans. The important part for us, again, in developing CARES was to take this into consideration and say, look, they've got plans. Let's find how we can build resilience into those plans, into the plans that they feel they have to have, and do it in a way not so much in terms of planning, but in terms of taking action. So again, I think it kind of validates the general approach we've been trying to take.
So you mentioned resilience right there, and so I think we ought to stop now and talk a little bit about why resilience, why we should be focused around that. So General, what would you want us to know about resilience?
Well, Jim, resilience is an interesting term that in this arena, sort of the social disruption, emergency management type arena, has grown in currency over the last 5 to 10 years really greatly. 10 years ago, probably, when someone talked about resilience, they were talking in terms of material sciences or biological sciences or perhaps in terms of the ecology. And now the idea that organizations, entities, nations, communities can be resilient to all sorts of things has grown greatly. We find it in strategic documents at the federal government level, at the state government level, and there's more and more conversation about how America, how its communities, how its people must be more resilient to deal with an increasingly turbulent and changing future. When we go into communities or when into college campuses, there is a tendency, if you sort of look at the chart, the little diagram on the screen, there is a tendency to begin thinking about this as an emergency response problem or an emergency management problem. And we say frequently that if we go into a community and a mayor says, I want to talk to you about this, and here's my emergency manager, my first responder, we're happy to talk to them. We understand that the first responders, the emergency managers, the people that handle acute disruptions on a community or a college campus are vital, that they are absolutely important. But what we believe is that they are not sufficient. Because if you're going to build through resilience an ability not just to bounce back from a disaster, not just to try to get where you were, but to really use the crisis to find a better place to be, to use the possibility of crisis or change or an understanding of turbulence and change to find opportunities in the future, we believe that that begins to get at the essence of why resilience is different and why resilience is the lens that allows us to look at ourselves, how we operate today, how we might operate in adversity, and how we seek to operate in clearly a future that is unknown and in some cases unknowable, and how we can continue to grow, build capacity, adapt in a way that allows us to handle that turbulence and change. So we see resilience as the top of that pyramid, if you will. It's great to have emergency response and emergency management. It's absolutely wonderful if you can manage risk the best you can. But if you can pull all of that together and begin to use the filter of how would I deal with change in the future? How am I going to deal with turbulence? How do I deal with a disruption in a way that allows me not just to respond, but to recover quickly, to preserve as much capacity as I have, and then recover the capacity that I've lost as quickly as I can? You begin to get at this idea of resilience. Now, the interesting thing is that no single entity on a community or a college campus can do that on their own. So you can't drive this through the emergency manager. This is something that requires, first and foremost, leadership at the top level to buy into it and say, we're going to use resilience as that lens. And then it means that you've got to get everybody together. On college campuses, it's not enough to simply have the emergency managers or the facilities managers or the administrative managers in this conversation. It has to involve the faculty. It has to involve the people who handle all of student life. And so when we can bring the whole community together, focus them on the idea of resilience, managing change in turbulent times, adapting and responding to adversity in ways that allow us to recover faster, fuller, faster, then it really changes that conversation, and we believe begins to be the essence of resilience.
One of the things that I see in looking at this is we don't have here the crisis management, which generally tends to be more strategic at the leadership level and going back to even being a governance responsibility for the board and the trustees that are involved. Emergency management and emergency response are critical, necessary functions, and we're very blessed in America that we have people that run toward the fire, whether it's a fire that's burning or a gunfire that's going on. And so those tactical responses are needed, but it also needs to have that strategic element that's included in it. As we think about it and we look at public companies, there's now an expectation of management of risk that we're seeing in these areas. And I think it's the same expectation that parents have that their children are being cared for by the colleges and universities, and that the employees within that area also are involved. So as we continue focusing on resilience in the campus, talk to me about this transformation.
Yeah, and it's interesting. It's not just, to expand your thought earlier if I can, Jim, I think it's not just that our parents and our students expect to be in a safe and secure environment or expect to have their children in a safe and secure environment, but they also expect to have their education continue. Even if we have adversity or we have turbulence or something that begins to affect our campus life, they actually expect that if my student is there, they're going to get back in school as quickly as we can. So we really see that all of this as a campus comes together to look at where it's going in the future, how it's going to manage its change and turbulence in the future, how it's going to respond to crisis and disaster, that it can truly begin to unlock, be transformative and really unlock the potential of the campus to fully come together and cooperate to chart its own future, take charge of its own destiny, if you will, as it goes forward. We think when you do that, and you can demonstrate that, because it's one way to, it's one thing to say all of this, but it's another thing to say we have actually gone through the processes, we have the plans, we have the playbooks, we have the strategic visions, we have the crisis management capabilities that are out there, and we can demonstrate those to you. We believe that that makes you a more competitive campus, whether it's competing for international students who are coming in from abroad, whose parents have a great vested interest in making sure that their students are taken care of, that they are secure and safe, and that their education will continue, or whether it's certainly the best students who are looking for the best college environment they can find that is safe, secure, they can continue their education, and they're going to get the value for their dollar when they're there.
Let me add something, Jim. If you look at the triangle, the tacticals at the bottom and then the strategic is at the top, and there is this expectation on the part of parents, but I think the one element that hasn't been mentioned that is the crucial element in terms of an institution of higher education is that people come to the school because the degree has value. And in a changing world, the school has got to continue to evolve the value proposition in terms of the education it offers. That's different than making sure they're safe, because that's a negative, really. People are not going to go to a school if they feel that their child, they're not going to send their child to a school if they feel the child's going to be unsafe. The value of the degree is the value proposition that draws people to the school. And we saw that Drexel, the nursing, the co-ops, ECSU, again, a great nursing program. And so, and we can go on and on and on with that. I mean, we were very much impressed with NTU, the Navajo Technical University, the way that they were evolving from the idea of just providing jobs for the tribal members to providing careers within the tribe for these people. I mean, this is a paradigm shift that you cannot imagine, but they have grown because they have recognized and have embraced this changing value proposition for the value of that degree. And that's the height of strategy and where resilience thinking really comes in.
John, I think that's good, and I think that leads right into the next point. This looks fairly complicated to me. Talk to me about campus capacity.
Yeah, the idea here is really pretty simple. This is a pictorial representation of everything that we just said. That campuses are in the middle of turbulent times, and because of that, they have a certain capacity. Well, they have capacities in various areas, whether it's research, whether it's the academics, you name it. You just put any of those on that y-axis. Change is going to occur. Some changes are good. Some colleges will get a huge grant. And I have seen examples, and I won't name schools, where they had tremendous positives that they messed up because they didn't think in terms of, well, what is this going to mean in terms of the overall value of the degree, or what does this mean in terms of how our campus is able or not able to grow. And so taking advantage of opportunities that are afforded to you are really good things. But the other part of resilience really is not only making the crises less severe and being able to recover faster, but it's taking advantage of those crises. We have a case in point now where, as a result of our engagement with Green River, they're doing some things looking at some potential crises in a very resilient way, thinking in terms of, well, how can we make an opportunity out of this? How can we take the lemon that we might receive and turn it into lemonade. That's the essence of resilience, and that's really what we're trying to say here. Resilient thinking is nothing more than looking at change and saying, what's in it for me? How can I turn this to my advantage?
Transforming crisis into value is really what this is about, as we think of it. President Kennedy wrote in his book a number of years ago that there were two symbols involved in creating crisis: danger and opportunity. If you focus only on one of those, you do it at your peril in terms of what you would miss from an opportunity or what you might incur because of the danger that were directly involved. So as we think now about resilient colleges and universities, let's expand that a little bit more. So, General, tell us give me a profile of this resilient university.
So, Tim, we actually put together this little series of bullets as we began to try to understand, for the purposes of this system, exactly what we were seeing after having visited these 7 universities. So these are things that we think that we have seen in many of the universities, perhaps in a lot of the universities we've talked to, not just the 7, but outside of that we think would characterize, if you will, the ideal resilient university. And I will tell you, it starts with leadership. We can't, I guess, hammer that point enough, where the leadership is committed and engaged and supportive and is bringing the entire campus together to understand what the challenges are and what the possibilities are that result from those challenges. We see universities and colleges really moving forward. Leadership is absolutely paramount and can change the crisis from something that in which we lose capacity into something that we gain opportunities and actually find additional ways that we can build capacities. Needless to say, that requires a unifying vision that's out there. John mentioned Drexel just a moment ago. Drexel was the first school we visited, and the first person we met, honestly, at Drexel when we were there was a van driver who picked us up in the downtown Philadelphia airport, who began to describe to us Drexel's vision on the van on the way to the school. And what was really amazing is we tested that van driver's view of that by talking to students and faculty and leaders all around, and it was absolutely coherent every place we talked to. So that kind of vision becomes really, really important as the school goes forward. We've talked about finding opportunity in turbulence and change. Turbulence and change is going to happen, and we think resilient universities leverage that. They understand it, and they're not trying to be the same thing tomorrow that they are today. They don't expect the world to be the same tomorrow, and they're looking for the opportunities that are in there. So many of our communities and our universities, our educational institutions, spend a lot of their time talking about how I'm going to respond to bad things. We need to talk about how we're going to recover from bad things. Because, in fact, if we don't recover, then there's not much sense in responding. If we're never going to bounce back, why are we going to spend the time even responding? So we think that a resilient university builds its plans around recovery. If the bad thing happens, this is how I'm going to. Now, the advantage of doing that is if the bad thing never happens, then what you've actually done is build capacity that allows you to find those opportunities and take advantage of them, or be more competitive as you go. So we really think focusing on recovery is important. I've talked about the whole community. It doesn't do any good for the people in buildings administration or people who run facilities to understand what they are going to do to recover a destroyed building or a badly damaged building if they don't understand from the people who use that building what they need from that building to continue to deliver their educational product. So only the chemistry professor understands what he needs in a laboratory and what he's going to have to go forward. So it's not just a matter of emergency managers and others. It's a matter of getting that professor involved in the recovery process. It's a matter of getting that student. One of the things we ask students when we go out there is what makes this school the school that it is? because that school experience is what's going to keep those students coming back, or it's going to cause them to come back after some sort of disaster. So what is it that makes this school, to you, student, what is it that makes this school what it is? And we've heard everything from, what was it, pizza night or pancake night. You know, as long as they're pancake night, I know my school's on an even keel and going forward to, you know, that clock tower out there. As long as I see that clock tower sitting in the middle of my campus, I know that things are okay. So understanding what makes this whole environment from everybody in the school is really important. And as importantly, you don't allow anybody to opt out. I will tell you, we have been to schools where we have been to schools and talked to schools where there was a significant divide between the academic community and the staff community. Not a hostile divide, but just, you know, the academic community expects the classroom's going to be there, the facilities are going to be there. It's not my problem if a disaster happens. But in fact, where they come together and we don't allow the academic community to opt out of these plans, then we see a much more resilient campus. We think, and I think my experience all my life says that, in fact, we tend to do things that we measure. We tend to do things that we are held responsible for. So we find that resilient campuses actually embed resilient practices and measure them in their institutional effectiveness measures. Many schools are required by their accreditation associations to build institutional effectiveness plans and to measure those institutional effectiveness plans. When resilience is built into those measurement plans, then we tend to do those things. When we put them in job descriptions and people are held responsible for having effective recovery plans, then we see those things happening. I think we know that we have to take care, if you would go to the next slide, we know that we have to take care of special populations. Just about every school we've talked to, whether those we've visited or beyond that, has an interest in increasing their international student body. That's one kind of special population. Well, with bringing in additional international students, you introduce additional complexities into your campus. You institute additional compliance regulations and requirements into your campus. So understanding what it's going to take to handle that population, as well as perhaps disabled populations or disadvantaged populations in other ways, understanding how you're going to deal with them, not just in crisis, but on a day-to-day basis, really improves the resilience. The other thing we found, and the next line says, lives resilience in day-to-day operation. That sounds a little glib, and perhaps it is. But what we realize is that nobody out on a college or university campus is looking for something else to do. Nobody's looking for another plan to produce. Nobody's looking for another meeting to go to. Nobody's looking for another assessment to do. So the more we can embed this idea of resilience and this lens, this filter of resilience into the things we already do, our strategic plans, our operational effectiveness plans, our strategic building plans, our capital investment plans, and the more we can build resilience into those, then the more we're going to use this filter on a day-to-day basis, and the more resilient we're going to become. We have been to several big campuses, and I will just cite, and quite frankly, this next one comes from Texas A&M University. Texas A&M is a tremendously big school with lots of resources and great capacities down there. And they're the ones who told us that you really have to guard that line between confidence and complacency. They're a very confident, competent campus because so much of their own destiny they control. They produce their own power. They take care of their own waste treatment. You know, they've got 11,000 acres on the main campus. They've got, I'm sure they would love to have more resources, but they have tremendous resources compared to some of the other schools we've been. They really have great capabilities, but they're the ones who said that we have to guard that line between competence and complacency because we are very competent. We have to make sure we're not complacent. And we think that's a tremendous lesson for any school. And then we have been, as I said earlier, interested for years now in community resilience, how American communities form the foundation for a continued resilient America. We believe that colleges and universities have mutual interest with their surrounding communities, their regions, in building this kind of resilient communities and resilient campuses. There are tremendous dependencies and interdependencies between the two. They are awfully, very inextricably woven together in their destinies. And so we really believe that universities can be one of the levers that move their communities and regions into a condition of greater resilience.
Well, thanks for sharing those insights. And the only comment that I have at this point, and you were at a very high level. I'm now going to take us down to a different level. I was following everything very comfortably until I was concerned about John and pancake night. I think that could be a financial disaster for a university to have John there with the pancake. So, John, there's obviously a process here. So step me through the process.
Sure. I'm not going to go through this in tremendous painful detail, but I do want to make a few points. At first, this is a pretty simple process. It's those 4 light-colored boxes on your screen. By organize, we mean get the leadership engaged and get everybody moving in the same direction. Assessment, we'll talk a bit more about that in a moment, but as Warren's already said, if you don't measure it, you're not going to do it. Action is really the key, and so an important part of our assessment process is not only to tell you where you are, but to say, here are some actions you can take that will improve you, will fill a gap, will help you do this better. And then finally, you have to always determine where you are. And again, this is guarding that line between confidence and complacency. Exercise and evaluate how you're doing. And part of that evaluation is taking action yet again. Now, on the top, we're showing you some of the things that are going into that from the CARES system, and they're basically tips, tools, templates, just a host of things to produce the outputs you see below. I think the really important thing that we've discovered, though, is we did a detailed analysis of CARES and what's in it and of the process and the individual process steps against the recently issued presidential guidance on developing high-quality emergency operation plans for IAGs, and found that not only does it produce a plan that is completely compliant, but that just as that document goes past planning into action, the CARES itself would carry a campus through the planning and into the action phase, and doing everything that's currently included in that presidential guidance. So we're real proud about that. In essence, what we're saying is that this operationalizes the presidential guidance.
And obviously, as we're looking at this, understanding where you are, where you're going, and how you're going to get there, the whole idea of understanding all the questions that are on our screen now and doing the assessment, and that'll be an opportunity for everyone on today's call to take a look at where their college is, where their university is relative to those as we move forward. Now, in focusing on the CARES program, you looked at campus service areas. Do you want to talk a little bit about those? We've got about 10 minutes left, John.
Yeah, I'll do this as briefly as I can. We have felt all along, and Warren said it as well earlier, that every part of the campus has to be part of this for the campus to truly be resilient, to truly be able to manage change. You can split up a campus into many different ways. We chose, again, to look at a whole of campus in terms of what we call service areas, basically functions that go on in a campus, services that are provided. And again, each campus is going to call something different than the one right next to it, but the idea being that they can recognize, oh, this service is provided by our student life organization or our facilities organization. And the intent then is to, for each of those areas, be able to assess and provide suggestions, suggested actions that they can take to make just that particular service area more resilient, make it better, and better able to withstand change.
And I think we have up on the screen now what those 15 are that you had focused on, and they could be called different names. But General, I see the word leadership at the top of this. Talk to me about that.
Well, again, Jim, we think that leadership is absolutely critical to going forward. We think a leader, a leadership organization can, particularly during crisis, make a difference in whether a campus finds opportunity and builds capacity, or whether it loses capacity and begins to decline. So we actually asked the leaders, we asked the universities, if you go to the next slide, to really ask themselves 3 questions. And we asked that our CARES system help them answer in very practical ways these 3 questions. And let me just elaborate very, very quickly on the diagram that John had earlier that sort of laid out the system. It is simple. We want it to be simple, but we want it to be powerful. So what it asks you to do is organize. It asks you then to go through these service areas and ask yourself a series of questions in a whole campus way about these. It suggests to you, based on your answers, exactly what actions we think would be useful for you to take. And they're the ones we've been vetting with these magnificent 7 universities we've been out there to make sure we've got the questions and the answers right. And then if we just stop there, it would be useful. But we've now put together some 300 to 400 resources that are tied to those actions. So if it says, here's an action you should take, it gives you 2 or 3 helps that you can take that action, a template, a suggestion, a good story, a link to somebody else who's done this, a link to a federal resource that's out there, so that you're not just left out there figuring out, what have I got to do? You know some things that have got to be done. And they're all to lead you to answer these questions. What do I have to do to restore my services as quickly as I possibly can? Once a disaster happens, once the crisis happens, how do I get back to getting students in the classrooms, teachers teaching them the normal routine of life on my campus as quickly as I can? How do I do that? That's what the assessment and the actions help you lead to. And then expanding that thought, what do I do now that leverages my capacity to take charge of my own future, to look for those opportunities in things that I know are going to change? And that resilience lens helps me focus on that. And then, as we said, how do I do this in my day-to-day operations? Because I don't need something else to do. How do I embed this in things that I actually do? And the key to that is a leadership lever, or the leadership influence on that lever as we go forward.
So it looks like you've created a series of things that are now available.
Absolutely. And so what we've tried to say is a simple system that everybody can understand, that allows you to assess against things that we know, and the 7 universities and others we've talked to have helped us understand really make a difference, those services. And then what are the tools, resources, techniques, practical things we can get you to help answer the challenges that you find as you do that assessment. And then we want to put it all together on the web because we really want this to be available to everybody. We can't go to all 6,474 institutions of higher, or whatever the number is, that's pretty close, institutions of higher education in the nation and do a week-long engagement. So we want something that's out there that's on the web where people can go and do this on their own, provide us feedback. We can continue to keep the tool and make it available to everybody in a simple, practical, useful process that produces action.
Now we're going to talk about action. I think we've certainly tried to give everyone a framework about where the project has gone over the last year and what's been created and what's about to be available to everyone at this point. So I think we're asking for a couple of things from everyone in attendance today that's listening to the webinar. General, do you want to talk a little bit about these 4 things?
Sure. We're looking to expand our partnership in very, very practical ways. So we want additional partners so that we can demonstrate what this system can do for other campuses. We'd like additional data. So we've got some surveys. We're going to send out a survey as a result of this engagement. And we ask you to respond to our survey because it's going to give us some more data that's going to help us understand where we need to go and where we need to take this. It'll also tell us how you'd like to participate. So if you are willing to continue to participate with us, if the things we've said today are interested, we want to know that. We know that there is lots of work going on campuses and universities that is really good stuff. We've not been to any campus or university that we didn't come away with something that we could put in this system and use. What we like to say that we don't steal anything, but with your permission, we borrow boldly. And we want some more borrowing that can put things in this system that other people can use. And particularly for you big schools that are out there, this can be really helpful to the smaller schools with fewer resources, places where every person on the campus is wearing 4 or 5 hats and trying to do 4 or 5 jobs. And then we are creating a focus group, and we really want you in that focus group. We'd like as many schools as possible that we can draw from, understand, and then figure out how to incorporate you into this system. We're trying to build something that's good for the nation, and we'd like you in our focus group when we're out there.
Well, there are now 6 things up on the screen, so we went from 4 to 6, and the survey that you mentioned will be out shortly to everyone attending today, and we're going to try to expand that circuit to even a larger group. So if there are colleges and universities near you that you have relationships with that you're on our webinar today, we would encourage you to forward the survey to them and have them join in and participate. We're going to try to have a conversation with everyone that attended today to talk about next steps and what they might mean for your college or your university. If you would like, we can do an assessment of where you are, of your current plans, and get a findings report. That sometimes is a good way to engage leadership or others within your organization to be a part of it. We are anticipating that we're going to try to do this web series, like you've heard today, once a month. We'll go back into an individual area and drill down into more detail. Today was the framework to give you an overview of the process and what some of the lessons learned. But we want to move from the what to the how. In the webinar series, we'll really focus on giving you the how in each of those. And then you've got to decide as an institution, do you want to join this CARES focus group to be a part of it? And if you want to have this information shared with someone from your campus that was not on the call today, you can go to firestorm.com and download a recording of today's webinar. It'll be up and posted in just a few hours. So it'll be up and available. So when you summarize this, it's a predict, plan, perform process. Understanding the vulnerabilities, the risks, the threats, what their impacts are, how you would monitor them, what are the triggers, plans across both facilities and operations and people in coming together, and then the ability to perform. We clearly have stressed today the exercising, the stress testing of plans, the training, the supplies that are needed to make sure that you have what you have in place, the ongoing monitoring that's associated with that, and then finally the making of those decisions. General, we've got a minute or so before we close. Any last comments that you want to share with our listeners?
Well, we really appreciate those who joined us today. This has been a collaborative arrangement trying to move the idea and understand the ways that we can build campuses more resilient. I particularly want to send my thanks and my hats off to those 7 universities who have put up with us throughout this process. They have been magnificent. They are a magnificent 7. But we appreciate everybody who joined us on the webinar today, and we are looking forward to hearing from you and working with you too in the future.
Well, thank you for all giving us this time today, and be on the lookout. John will be on a campus eating pancakes near you soon as we run through these various things. And feel free to share this information with the rest of your campus and the colleges and universities near you. This is something that we're all facing together, and I think we can make a significant change here. So we look forward to seeing you become a resilient campus. Thanks to everyone. Have a great day. This concludes our webinar today. Goodbye.